The sound of Derek's laughter still echoes in my mind, sharp and dismissive, cutting through the warm Oregon evening air like a blade. He was doubled over at our parents' dining table, wiping tears from his eyes as he held up his phone, showing our extended family the LinkedIn post I'd just published about my little startup reaching its first milestone. Streamline Analytics celebrates 100 clients served, he read aloud between gasps, his voice dripping with mockery. Zoe, seriously? 100 clients? My intern probably processes more data requests than your entire company handles in a month. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Parker family barbecue had been going so well until that moment. The scent of cedar from our Beaverton neighborhood mixed with Dad's famous salmon on the grill, and Mount Hood stood majestic in the distance, its snow-capped peak catching the golden hour light. Our cousins from Seattle were visiting. Aunts and uncles filled the backyard, and everyone seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my business journey. Until Derek decided to turn it into his personal comedy show. TechFlow Solutions just signed a contract worth more than Zoe's entire company will ever be worth, he continued, straightening his designer polo shirt with that smug expression I'd grown to despise. We're talking real business here, not some garage startup playing with spreadsheets. His words hit harder because they came from someone who was supposed to support me. Derek wasn't just my older brother by 3 years. He'd once been my closest friend, my protector, the one who taught me how to code when I was 12 years old. The transformation had started when he landed his position as Senior Analytics Director at TechFlow Solutions 2 years ago. Suddenly, his sister's dreams weren't worth supporting anymore. Every family gathering became an opportunity for him to remind everyone how successful he'd become, how his corner office overlooked the Willamette River, how his team managed Fortune 500 accounts while I was still working out of a shared space in Southeast Portland. Derek, that's enough, our mother said quietly, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was disappointed but trying to keep peace. The backyard fell silent except for the gentle hum of conversations at neighboring houses and the distant sound of traffic on Canyon Road. I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. My cousin Bradley looked uncomfortable, poking at his potato salad while avoiding eye contact. Aunt Carmen whispered something to Uncle Luis in Spanish, probably wondering why family dinners had to become battlefields. Even my teenage nephew Kyle had stopped scrolling through his phone to witness what would happen next. It's okay, Mom, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the humiliation burning in my chest. Derek's just excited about his success. I'm proud of him. The lie tasted bitter, but I'd learned that responding with grace was better than feeding into his need for conflict. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that his mocking laughter was about to become the most expensive sound he'd ever made. My name is Zoe Parker, and I'm 28 years old. 3 years ago, I was exactly where Derek thought I still was, a struggling entrepreneur with big dreams and a small bank account, working 16-hour days in a cramped co-working space that smelled like instant coffee and desperation. Today I'm still working out of that same co-working space by choice, but Streamline Analytics isn't the tiny startup my family believes it to be. The truth is, I've been operating under a carefully constructed facade for the past 18 months. While Derek was climbing the corporate ladder at TechFlow and making sure everyone knew about it, I was quietly building something revolutionary. What started as a simple data analytics platform had evolved into an artificial intelligence system that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. My 100 clients weren't small businesses struggling with basic reporting needs. They were subsidiaries and shell companies of major corporations who paid premium prices for access to my proprietary algorithms. The initial breakthrough came during a project for what I thought was a medium-sized manufacturing company in Vancouver, Washington. They wanted help optimizing their supply chain logistics, but when I dove deep into their data patterns, I uncovered inefficiencies that went far beyond what traditional analytics could detect. My AI system identified cost-saving opportunities worth millions of dollars within their first quarter of implementation. Word spread quickly in circles where discretion was valued and results spoke louder than marketing budget. Soon I was handling projects for companies across the Pacific Northwest, then California, then nationwide. Each success led to bigger contracts, more sophisticated challenges, and clients who understood the value of keeping their competitive advantages secret. Patricia Valdez, my former professor at Portland State University and now my unofficial mentor, had warned me about the dangers of rapid growth. Zoe, you're sitting on something that could revolutionize how businesses understand their own data, she told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings at Stumptown on Division. But you're also young, and the tech world doesn't always respect young women, especially those who don't fit the stereotype of what success looks like. Her advice was to stay quiet, keep growing, and let results speak for themselves. So while Derek was posting LinkedIn updates about his latest team lunch and sharing articles about TechFlow's quarterly earnings, I was discreetly building relationships with decision makers at companies he could only dream of working with. Riley Thompson, my business partner and the only person besides Dr. Valdez who knew the full scope of our operations, often joked that we were running the most successful stealth startup in Portland. "It's like being Batman," she'd say while reviewing our encrypted financial reports in our deliberately modest office space. "Everyone thinks Bruce Wayne is just a rich playboy, but he's actually saving Gotham every night." The Batman comparison wasn't entirely wrong. During the day, I maintained my cover as a small-time entrepreneur. I drove my 5-year-old Honda Civic to meetings, dressed in clothes from Target and Nordstrom Rack, and talked enthusiastically about my growing client base. But behind the scenes, I was orchestrating deals worth millions, developing proprietary technology that industry leaders were desperate to access, and building a company that was already generating more revenue than most established firms. The irony wasn't lost on me that Derek's constant belittling actually helped maintain my cover. When family members asked about my business, his dismissive comments made them less likely to probe deeper. Why would anyone investigate a startup that Derek Parker, successful corporate executive, deemed barely worth mentioning? But maintaining this double life was exhausting, especially when it meant watching my brother's ego inflate with each family gathering. Tonight's barbecue had pushed things too far. The way he'd held up my LinkedIn post like it was evidence of my failure, the satisfied smirk when other family members looked at me with pity, the casual cruelty of dismissing years of my work as playing with spreadsheets, all of it crystallized my resolve. It was time for Derek to learn that success isn't always loud, and the biggest victories often happen in silence. As the evening wound down and family members began saying their goodbyes, I helped Mom clear dishes while Derek regaled Uncle Luis with stories about TechFlow's latest acquisition plans. "We're looking at expanding our analytics division," he said, his voice carrying across the patio. "Marcus Chen, our CEO, says the market demand is incredible. Companies are desperate for real data intelligence solutions." I paused in stacking plates, my attention sharpening. Marcus Chen, I knew that name, though Derek had no idea how well I knew it. Marcus had been pursuing a meeting with Streamline Analytics for 6 months through intermediaries, trying to understand how a small Portland startup was consistently outperforming established firms in predictive analytics. His inquiries had become increasingly urgent as TechFlow's own analytics division struggled to meet client demands. "The funny thing is," Derek continued, completely oblivious to my interest, "there's apparently some tiny local company that's been making waves in the industry. Marcus mentioned they might try to poach talent from smaller firms, maybe even acquire some of these garage operations to boost our capabilities." The plates nearly slipped from my hands. Derek was talking about Streamline Analytics, about me, without realizing it. The beautiful irony of the moment almost made me laugh out loud. Here was my brother, discussing his company's plans to acquire firms like mine, having just finished mocking my business in front of our entire family. "Really?" I said casually, walking past with the stack of dishes. "That sounds like an interesting opportunity." Derek barely glanced at me. "Oh, Zoe, you wouldn't understand the complexities involved. This is Fortune 500 level business strategy, not startup dreams." His dismissive tone was the final straw. As I walked into the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text message from Jonathan Hayes, the investment advisor who handled my more delicate business arrangements. "Marcus Chen reached out again, says TechFlow is ready to make a serious offer for a partnership or acquisition. Should I set up a meeting?" I looked out the kitchen window at Derek, who was now drawing diagrams on a napkin to illustrate some point about market dominance to our captivated relatives. The golden hour had faded, and string lights my parents had hung for the barbecue cast a warm glow over the backyard scene. Everything looked peaceful and ordinary, but I could feel the wheels of change beginning to turn. My fingers moved quickly across my phone screen. "Tell Ms. Chen, I'm interested in discussing TechFlow's future, but I want to meet with their entire executive team present. And Jonathan, make sure Derek Parker is in the room when it happens." The next phase of my plan was already formed. Derek thought he understood the tech industry, thought he knew what real success looked like. He was about to discover that his little sister's garage startup was actually the solution to problems he didn't even know his company was facing. But this wasn't just about proving Derek wrong anymore. Watching him dismiss, not just my work but the entire concept that someone like me could achieve something significant had revealed something deeper. His mockery tonight wasn't just sibling rivalry, it represented a mindset that needed to change. Too many people in the tech industry made assumptions based on appearances, age, gender, or the size of someone's office space. They measured success by noise level instead of actual results. Derek was about to learn that the most dangerous competitors are often the ones you never see coming. The morning after the barbecue, I woke up in my modest apartment in the Hawthorne district, with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in months. Outside my window, the familiar sounds of Portland morning life provided a comforting backdrop: the hiss of espresso machines from the cafe downstairs, the gentle whoosh of cyclists heading to work, the distant rumble of the MAX train carrying commuters across the river. My apartment reflected the same carefully maintained image as everything else in my public life. Furnished with pieces from IKEA and local thrift stores, decorated with prints from Saturday market vendors, it looked exactly like what people expected from a struggling entrepreneur trying to make ends meet. The only hint of my real situation was the high-end laptop and secure communication equipment hidden in what appeared to be a vintage writing desk, inherited from my grandmother. As I made my morning coffee using a French press that cost more than Derek probably thought I spent on groceries in a month, my phone rang. Dr. Valdez's name appeared on the screen, and I answered immediately. "Zoe, I hope I'm not calling too early." Her voice carried the warmth that had made her my favorite professor and later my most trusted advisor.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I heard through some mutual connections that TechFlow Solutions has been making inquiries about Streamline Analytics. Should I be I settled into my kitchen chair, looking out at the maple tree in my building's courtyard. Its leaves were just beginning to show hints of the brilliant reds and golds that would define Portland's autumn in a few weeks. "Actually, Dr. Valdez, I think it might be exactly what we've been waiting for." "Explain." I told her about Derek's performance at the barbecue, about his casual dismissal of my work and his unwitting revelation of TechFlow's acquisition plan. As I spoke, I could hear her making those small sounds of understanding she always made when working through a complex problem. "So your brother works at the company that's trying to acquire you, but he has no idea that you're the owner of the company they want." "Not just any employee," I clarified. "He's the senior analytics director. He's probably been involved in evaluating why their current analytics capabilities aren't meeting client demands. He might even be part of the team that identified Streamline as a potential acquisition target." Dr. Valdez was quiet for a moment. "Zoe, you realize this gives you an unprecedented advantage in negotiations. You know their internal perspective, their pain points, probably even their budget limitations through family conversation." She was right, though I hadn't consciously connected all those dots until now. Over the past year, Derek's boasting about TechFlow's challenges and successes had inadvertently provided me with insider information about their strategic needs. His complaints about difficult clients, his frustrations with outdated systems, his excitement about budget increases for the analytics division, all of it had painted a detailed picture of a company struggling to keep up with market demands despite their impressive client roster. "There's something else," I said. "I want Derek in the room when the acquisition terms are presented. Not just as an employee, but as someone who finally understands what his little sister has actually accomplished." "That sounds like it could be emotionally complicated." "Maybe, but Derek isn't just my brother. He represents a mindset that's prevalent in our industry. Too many people make assumptions about what success looks like, who deserves respect, and whose ideas are worth taking serious. If I can change his perspective, maybe it ripples out to change how he treats others." Dr. Valdez chuckled. "And if you happen to enjoy the look on his face when he realizes his baby sister owns the company his CEO has been desperately trying to court, well, that's just a bonus." "Just a small bonus," I agreed, unable to suppress my grin. After hanging up with Dr. Valdez, I drove my Honda to the co-working space in Southeast Portland that served as Streamline's public headquarters. The building was a converted warehouse in an up-and-coming neighborhood, the kind of place that looked appropriately scrappy for a startup while still providing the infrastructure I actually need. Riley was already at her desk when I arrived, her laptop surrounded by multiple monitors and the kind of technical setup that would have impressed Derek if he'd ever bothered to visit. She looked up as I entered, her expression immediately shifting to the alert curiosity that meant she'd already heard something interesting. "Jonathan called this morning," she said without preamble. "Marcus Chen wants to meet next week. He's apparently been authorized to discuss both partnership opportunities and a potential full acquisition." I settled into my desk chair, considering the implications. Did Jonathan mention whether Chen knows who he's actually meeting with? That's the beautiful part. Chen requested the meeting with Streamline's leadership team, but Jonathan maintained our standard confidentiality protocols. As far as TechFlow knows, they're meeting with the founders of a promising analytics startup. They have no idea the founder is Derek Parker's little sister. The irony continued to build. Derek had spent months telling family members about his important role in TechFlow's expansion plans, about how he was helping evaluate potential acquisitions and partnerships. He'd probably been in meetings where Marcus Chen discussed the mysterious streamline analytics that was consistently outperforming established firms in their market sector. "What's your read on timing?" I asked Riley. "If we move too fast, it might seem suspicious. Too slow, and we might miss the opportunity for maximum impact." Riley pulled up a calendar on one of her monitors. "Here's what I'm thinking. TechFlow's quarterly board meeting is next Thursday. If we could schedule our meeting for Wednesday, whatever decisions come out of our discussion would be fresh for Chen to present to his board. It would also mean Derek would likely hear about any major announcements through normal company channels." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would meet with Marcus Chen and his team on Wednesday, discuss Streamline's capabilities and TechFlow's needs, and hopefully reach preliminary agreement on acquisition terms. Then at TechFlow's board meeting on Thursday, Chen would announce the acquisition to his executive team, including Derek. "There's one more element I want to add," I said. "I want to attend TechFlow's announcement meeting." Riley raised an eyebrow. "As Streamline's CEO? Exactly. Chen can introduce me as the founder and CEO of the company they're acquiring. Derek will be sitting in that conference room, expecting to hear about some external acquisition, and instead he'll discover that his little sister just became his new business partner." The risk was significant. Revealing my identity this dramatically could backfire if Derek felt publicly humiliated rather than enlightened. But after 3 years of watching him dismiss not just my work but my potential, I was ready to show him that success doesn't always announce itself with expensive suits and corner offices. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparation for what could be the most important meeting of Streamline's existence. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was preparing to sell my company to the firm where my brother worked, the same brother who thought I was barely capable of running a legitimate business. Jonathan Hayes proved invaluable in structuring the initial discussions with Marcus Chen's team. As one of Portland's most connected investment advisors, he built relationships with decision-makers throughout the Pacific Northwest tech scene. More importantly, he understood the delicate balance between maintaining Streamline's competitive advantages and demonstrating our value to potential acquirers. "Chen's been asking detailed questions about your client retention rates and the scalability of your AI algorithms," Jonathan told me during a strategy session at his downtown office. "He's clearly done his homework, but he's also operating under some assumptions about your company size and infrastructure that might work in your favor." "What kind of assumptions?" "Standard Silicon Valley thinking. He expects a small Portland startup to be scrappy but limited, innovative but resource-constrained. The fact that you've been operating below the radar has actually enhanced your perceived value. You're not just a successful company, you're a mystery that industry leaders want to solve." This aligned perfectly with my long-term strategy. By keeping Streamline's true scope and profitability private, I'd created an aura of untapped potential that made us more attractive to acquirers. Marcus Chen wasn't just buying a successful analytics company, he was buying access to proprietary technology and market insights that his competitors couldn't replicate. The preliminary research I conducted on TechFlow's current challenges confirmed what Derek's family conversations had already suggested. Despite their impressive client roster and steady revenue growth, they were struggling with the same problem facing most traditional tech firms. Their legacy systems couldn't adapt quickly enough to meet evolving market demands. Their analytics division, Derek's domain, was particularly vulnerable. While they maintained relationships with major clients through personal service and established trust, they were losing ground to more agile competitors who could provide faster insights and more accurate predictions. Streamline's AI-driven approach represented exactly the kind of innovation TechFlow needed to maintain their market position. The beautiful irony was that Derek had probably been part of internal discussions about these challenges. He might have even contributed to strategy sessions about potential solutions, never knowing that his sister had already built the exact tools his company desperately needed. As Wednesday approached, I found myself thinking about the broader implications of this moment. Beyond the personal satisfaction of proving Derek wrong, this acquisition represented validation of everything I'd worked toward. The late nights debugging algorithms, the careful relationship building with clients who valued discretion over publicity, the strategic decision to prioritize substance over image, all of it was about to pay off in the most visible way possible. But there was also fear. Once I revealed Streamline's true scope and my role as its founder, there would be no going back to the comfortable anonymity I'd maintained. Derek would know, our family would know, and the Portland tech community would know that the quiet woman working out of a converted warehouse had built something significant. The question was whether Derek would be able to handle learning that his assumptions about success, about his sister, and about what really mattered in business had been completely wrong. Tomorrow's meeting would determine not just Streamline's future, but whether my brother could evolve beyond the narrow mindset that had driven him to mock my dreams in the first place. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Portland feel electric with possibility. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, carefully selecting an outfit that would strike the right balance for today's meeting with Marcus Chen. Not too polished, which might contradict Streamline's modest startup image, but professional enough to command respect in TechFlow's gleaming conference room. I settled on a navy blazer from Nordstrom paired with dark jeans and comfortable flats, the kind of ensemble that suggested competence without ostentation. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was dressing down for a meeting where I'd be discussing the sale of a company worth more than most people would earn in several lifetimes. Riley met me at our co-working space an hour before the scheduled meeting, her laptop bag packed with encrypted presentations and financial documents that would soon redefine Marcus Chen's understanding of what Streamline Analytics actually represent. She'd been working late into the night preparing materials that walked the fine line between revealing our capabilities and maintaining the strategic advantages that made us valuable. "I keep thinking about the look on your brother's face tomorrow," she said as we reviewed our presentation one final time. "When Chen announces the acquisition and introduces you as Streamline's founder, Derek's going to realize that every dismissive comment he made about your business was actually about a company his CEO desperately wanted to acquire." The weight of that realization was something I'd been processing for days. This wasn't just about business success or financial gain, it was about fundamentally shifting the narrative that Derek and people like him carried about what success looked like and who deserved to achieve. My phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan Hayes confirming the meeting details. Marcus Chen had reserved TechFlow's executive conference room, the same space where Derek attended his weekly leadership meeting. In a few hours I'd be sitting in my brother's professional sanctuary, negotiating terms that would make Streamline Analytics a household name in the Portland tech community. The drive to TechFlow's Pearl District headquarters felt surreal. I'd driven past this building countless times over the past 2 years, knowing Derek worked inside, sometimes even spotting his car in the executive parking area. Now I was pulling into that same parking area as an invited guest, someone Marcus Chen considered important enough to warrant his personal attention. TechFlow's lobby was exactly what I'd expected from Derek's descriptions: soaring ceilings with exposed steel beams, polished concrete floors, and abstract art pieces that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. The receptionist, a young woman with the kind of effortless style that suggested she spent her weekends at Alberta Street galleries, greeted us with professional warmth. "Miss Parker and Miss Thompson for Marcus Chen," I said, offering my identification. The name Parker didn't seem to register with her, which meant Derek's tendency to overshare about his family hadn't extended to the front office staff. We were escorted to an elevator that opened directly into the executive floor, a detail Derek had mentioned during one of his stories about important meetings and high-level strategy sessions. The hallway was lined with photographs of TechFlow's major projects, data visualizations for Fortune 500 companies, analytics dashboards for government agencies, complex modeling systems for financial institutions. It was impressive work, the kind of portfolio that justified Derek's pride in his employer. Marcus Chen's assistant led us into the conference room, where Derek had probably sat through hundreds of meetings, contributing to discussions about market strategies and competitive analysis. The space commanded attention: floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the Willamette River, a mahogany table that could seat 20 people, and wall-mounted displays showing real-time data from TechFlow's various client projects.
Marcus Chen entered a few minutes later, accompanied by 2 other executives I didn't recognize, but whose body language suggested they held significant decision-making authority. Chen was younger than I'd expected, probably in his early 40s, with the kind of relaxed confidence that came from building a successful company from the ground up. His handshake was firm, his eye contact direct, and his entire demeanor suggested someone who valued substance over style. "Miss Parker, Miss Thompson, thank you for coming in today," he said, gesturing for us to take seats around the conference table. "I'll be honest, Streamline Analytics has been on our radar for quite some time. Your company's performance metrics are frankly remarkable for an organization of your size." Riley and I exchanged a glance. Chen's assumption about our size was exactly what we'd expected, and it provided the perfect opening for the conversation we needed to have. "We appreciate TechFlow's interest," I replied, settling into the leather chair that Derek had probably occupied during his own meetings in this room. "Before we discuss potential partnership opportunities,
It might be helpful if you could share what specific challenges led TechFlow to consider external acquisitions. Chen leaned back, clearly appreciating the directness of the question. Our analytics division has been struggling to keep pace with client demands. We have excellent relationships and solid foundational technology, but we're seeing increased competition from firms that can provide faster insights and more accurate predictive modeling. Frankly, we're losing ground to companies like yours. One of his colleagues, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes who'd been introduced as Sarah Mitchell, TechFlow's chief technology officer, leaned forward. We've been tracking Streamline's client retention rates and project success metrics. Your numbers suggest capabilities that should require significantly larger infrastructure investments than what we'd expect from a startup of your apparent size. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. The careful dance between revealing Streamline's true scope while maintaining the negotiating position that came from being underestimated. That's an astute observation, I said, opening my laptop and connecting it to the room's presentation system. What if I told you that your assumptions about Streamline's size and infrastructure might not align with reality? The first slide of our presentation appeared on the wall-mounted display. Streamline Analytics' actual client roster. Not the 100 small businesses Derek had mocked at the family barbecue, but a list of major corporations, government agencies, and financial institutions that represented some of the most sophisticated data challenges in the market. The solace in the room was profound. Marcus Chen's expression shifted from polite interest to intense focus as he recognized name after name on the list. These weren't just clients, they were accounts that TechFlow had been competing for, in some cases unsuccessfully. This is remarkable, Sarah Mitchell said quietly, scrolling through the client list on her tablet. Some of these companies have been working with Streamline for over a year. We've been wondering how they were achieving such impressive analytics outcomes. Riley advanced to the next slide. Our revenue projections for the current fiscal year. The numbers on screen represented income that exceeded TechFlow's entire analytics division by a significant margin. What Marcus Chen had assumed was a promising startup was actually a major player that had been operating below the radar. I don't understand, Chen said, studying the financial data with growing amazement. These numbers suggest Streamline is already a significant competitor in our market space. Why haven't we heard more about your company? Because we've been deliberately maintaining a low profile, I explained. Our clients value discretion, and our competitive advantages come from innovation rather than marketing. While other companies have been focused on building their public profiles, we've been focused on building better solutions. The third slide showed examples of Streamline's proprietary AI algorithms, the technology that enabled us to provide insights that traditional analytics firms couldn't match. These weren't just improvements on existing methodologies. They represented fundamental breakthroughs in how businesses could understand and predict market behaviors. Marcus Chen was no longer sitting back in his chair. He was leaning forward, his full attention focused on the presentation, occasionally exchanging meaningful glances with his colleagues. This wasn't the meeting he'd expected to have with a small Portland startup. This was a negotiation with a company that could potentially transform TechFlow's entire market position. Ms. Parker, I have to ask, Chen said during a pause in the presentation. Why are you considering a partnership or acquisition? Based on what you've shown us, Streamline appears to be thriving independently. The question I'd been waiting for, the moment to shift the conversation from Streamline's capabilities to the broader vision that could benefit both companies. Several reasons, I said, advancing to a slide that outlined potential synergies between our organizations. First, while Streamline has been successful operating independently, there are scalability challenges that partnership with an established firm like TechFlow could address. Second, your client relationships and industry reputation could provide access to opportunities that might take us years to develop on our own. Sarah Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. And from TechFlow's perspective, partnership with Streamline would immediately address the competitive pressures we've been facing in the analytics market. Exactly. But there's a third reason that's perhaps most important, I continue. The tech industry has a tendency to make assumptions about success based on visibility rather than results. Companies like Streamline prove that innovation doesn't always come with publicity campaigns and venture capital announcements. Sometimes the most valuable solutions are developed quietly by teams focused on solving problems rather than building profiles. The room fell quiet as the implications of that statement settled in. Chen and his colleagues were processing not just the business opportunity, but the realization that they'd been operating under fundamental misconceptions about who their real competitors were. Ms. Parker, I'm going to be direct, Chen said after a long moment. Based on what you've shared today, Streamline isn't just a potential acquisition target. You're a company that could acquire us. Why are you interested in joining forces rather than simply continuing to outcompete us in the marketplace? The honesty of the question deserved an equally honest response.
Because competition alone doesn't advance the industry, TechFlow has built relationships and established trust with clients over years of reliable service. Streamline has developed technology that could enhance that service exponentially. Together, we could create something that benefits not just our companies, but the entire analytics ecosystem. Riley advanced to our final slide, a proposed partnership structure that would integrate Streamline's technology with TechFlow's client relationships, while maintaining the autonomy that had enabled our innovation. The terms were generous to both sides, reflecting the mutual value that partnership could create. Marcus Chen studied the proposal carefully, occasionally whispering with his colleagues. The numbers represented a significant investment for TechFlow, but also access to technology and market advantages that could justify the expense within the first year. This is not what I expected when I scheduled today's meeting, Chen admitted with a slight smile. I thought we were discussing the acquisition of a promising startup. Instead, we're talking about partnership with a company that's been quietly revolutionizing our industry. Sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we don't see coming. Sarah Mitchell looked up from her detailed review of the proposal. Miss Parker, I have one more question. This level of innovation, this strategic thinking, the decision to operate below the radar until the right moment, it suggests experience and business sophistication that goes beyond what we'd typically expect from someone your age. What's your background? The question provided an opening to share the story I'd been keeping private for so long. My graduate work in business and computer science at Portland State, the early cryptocurrency investments that provided initial funding, the deliberate decision to build substance before seeking recognition, yes, the family dynamics that had motivated me to prove that success could take forms that weren't immediately visible. I've been fortunate to have mentors who emphasized results over recognition, I said. Patricia Valdez at Portland State taught me that the most sustainable businesses are built on solving real problems, not on generating publicity. That philosophy has guided every decision we've made at Streamline. Chen nodded approvingly. It shows in your company's performance metrics. But I'm curious about something else. Parker is a common name, but our senior analytics director is Derek Parker. Any relation? The moment I'd been anticipating and dreading in equal measure had arrived. The connection that would transform tomorrow's board meeting announcement from a routine business update into something far more significant. Derek is my older brother, I said simply. The silence that followed was charged with implication. Marcus Chen's expression shifted as he processed this information, clearly connecting dots about family dynamics and professional relationships that added layers of complexity to our discussion. Does Derek know about Streamline's actual scope and success? Sarah Mitchell asked carefully. No. Derek believes Streamline is a small startup with minimal impact on the market. He's been quite vocal about his skepticism regarding my business capabilities. Chen leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Ms. Parker, I think I'm beginning to understand why you wanted to have this conversation now, just before our quarterly board meeting. The rest of the meeting focused on technical details and timeline considerations, but the energy in the room had fundamentally shifted. What had started as a routine acquisition discussion had become something much more interesting. A strategic partnership that would reshape TechFlow's market position while providing Streamline with the resources to scale our innovation. As we prepared to leave, Marcus Chen walked us to the elevator personally. Ms. Parker, I want you to know that regardless of Derek's previous comments about your company, your presentation today has been one of the most impressive I've encountered in my career. Streamline's achievements speak for themselves. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I look forward to tomorrow's board meeting. His smile suggested he was looking forward to it as well, though probably for different reasons than mine. Riley and I drove back to our co-working space in contemplative silence, both processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. In the span of 2 hours, Streamline Analytics had transformed from Derek's example of startup futility into TechFlow's most important strategic partnership opportunity. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Riley asked as we pulled into our familiar parking spot. I sat in the car for a moment, watching other entrepreneurs and freelancers walking into the converted warehouse that had been Streamline's home base for 3 years. Tomorrow, Derek would discover that his little sister's garage startup was actually the solution to problems he'd been complaining about in weekly leadership meetings. Nervous, I admitted, but also ready. It's time for Derek to understand that success doesn't always look the way he thinks it should. The next morning would bring revelations that would change not just Derek's understanding of his sister's capabilities, but his entire perspective on what it meant to build something meaningful in the business world. Thursday morning felt different from the moment I opened my eyes. The familiar sounds of Portland waking up outside my Hawthorne District apartment carried an undercurrent of anticipation that seemed to match my own internal energy. Today was the day Derek would discover that his dismissive laughter at the family barbecue had been directed at a company his CEO was about to announce as TechFlow's most significant strategic acquisition. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling through various scenarios of how the morning's board meeting might unfold. Marcus Chen had confirmed the details via encrypted message. The announcement would happen during TechFlow's regular Thursday executive briefing, with all department heads present including Derek. Chen had specifically requested that I attend as Streamline's representative, ostensibly to answer technical questions about integration planning. The reality was far more dramatic. Derek would walk into that conference room expecting another routine quarterly update, and instead discover that his little sister had built the exact solution his department had been struggling to develop. The poetic justice was almost overwhelming. Riley arrived at my apartment earlier than usual, carrying coffee from our favorite roastery on Division Street, and wearing an expression that mixed excitement with concern. She'd been my closest confidant throughout Streamline's growth, the only person besides Valdez who fully understood the careful strategy that had brought us to this moment. "I've been thinking about potential complications," she said, settling into my kitchen chair while I finished getting ready. "What if Derek reacts badly? What if he feels so humiliated that it damages your family relationships permanently?" The question had been haunting me as well. My plan for dramatic revelation carried real risks beyond just business consideration. Derek might never forgive the public nature of his education about judging people based on appearances. Our parents would undoubtedly be caught in the middle of whatever aftermath emerged from today's event. "I've considered that," I said, adjusting the collar of the same navy blazer I'd worn to yesterday's meeting. "But Derek's dismissiveness isn't just about me. It's about his entire worldview regarding who deserves respect and whose ideas are worth considering. If I can change his perspective, even if it's uncomfortable initially, it might prevent him from treating others the same way." Riley nodded thoughtfully. "Plus there's the broader industry impact. How many other talented people have been dismissed because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of what success should look like?" That was the larger motivation driving my decision to orchestrate this revelation so publicly. Derek represented a mindset prevalent throughout the tech industry, where assumptions about age, gender, education, pedigree, and company size often determined who received serious consideration. By demonstrating that his own sister had achieved something significant while operating outside those traditional markers of success, I hoped to challenge not just his personal biases, but the systemic thinking that created barriers for others. We arrived at TechFlow's Pearl District headquarters an hour before the scheduled board meeting. Marcus Chen had arranged for us to use a smaller conference room adjacent to the main boardroom, ostensibly for final preparation but really to ensure Derek couldn't spot me before the official announcement. The building felt different this morning, charged with the energy of impending change. Jonathan Hayes met us in the lobby, his expression reflecting the magnitude of what was about to unfold. As my investment advisor and the architect of yesterday's successful negotiations, he understood better than anyone how dramatically this moment would shift perceptions of Streamline Analytics and my role as its founder. "Marcus Chen called me early this morning," Jonathan said as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. "The final paperwork was approved by TechFlow's board. This isn't just an announcement anymore. It's a done deal. Streamline Analytics is officially partnering with TechFlow Solutions, with you maintaining operational control of your division." The terms we'd negotiated were unprecedented in my experience. Rather than a traditional acquisition where the smaller company gets absorbed into the larger organization, our partnership maintains Streamline's independence, while providing access to TechFlow's resources and client relationships. I would continue as Streamline's CEO while also joining TechFlow's executive leadership team. More importantly for today's purposes, the announcement would position me as an equal partner rather than an acquired asset. Derek wouldn't just be learning that his sister owned a successful company. He'd be discovering that she was now his colleague at the executive level. Marcus Chen greeted us in the adjacent conference room, his demeanor reflecting both professional satisfaction with yesterday's negotiations and personal anticipation for the morning's revelation. He'd clearly given considerable thought to how the announcement should be structured for maximum impact. "I want to be transparent about my approach this morning," Chen said, reviewing his presentation notes one final time. "The announcement will focus initially on Streamline's capabilities and market position, before revealing your identity as the founder. Derek and the other department heads need to understand the business value before personal relationships complicate their assessment." The strategy was sound. By establishing Streamline's credentials first, Chen would ensure that Derek's initial reaction was based on professional merit rather than family dynamics. Only after everyone understood the significance of the partnership would the personal connection be revealed. I've structured the presentation to highlight specific challenges our analytics division has faced over the past year. Chen continued. Derek has been vocal in leadership meetings about these issues, so he'll immediately recognize how Streamline's capabilities address his department's needs. The irony continued to build. Derek had unknowingly been advocating for solutions that his sister had already developed. His complaints about outdated systems, his frustrations with competitive pressures, his requests for budget increases to develop better analytics tools, all of it had been pointing toward technologies that Streamline had perfected months ago. Through the conference room's glass wall, I could see TechFlow employees beginning to arrive for the morning meeting. Derek's distinctive laugh echoed down the hallway as he chatted with colleagues, completely unaware that today would fundamentally alter his understanding of both his professional challenges and his family dynamic. Sarah Mitchell appeared in our doorway, her expression mixing professional courtesy with barely contained excitement. As TechFlow's chief technology officer, she understood the technical significance of yesterday's revelations better than anyone else in the building. The integration possibilities are remarkable, she said, addressing me directly. Your AI algorithms could enhance virtually every project in our current portfolio. We're not just gaining a partner, we're leapfrogging our competition by several years. Her assessment reinforced the business logic behind our partnership while adding another layer of irony to Derek's situation. His department would be the primary beneficiary of technologies developed by the sister he'd been mocking for her supposed business failure. Marcus Chen's assistant knocked softly on the door. Mr. Chen, everyone is assembled in the boardroom. We're ready when you are. The moment had arrived. 3 years of building Streamline Analytics in deliberate obscurity, months of strategic planning, and days of careful preparation had led to this single announcement that would reshape not just business relationships but family dynamics. Ms. Parker, are you ready? Chen asked, his expression acknowledging the personal significance of what was about to unfold. I gathered my materials and took a deep breath. I'm ready. The walk from our preparation room to TechFlow's main boardroom felt both endless and instantaneous. Through the glass walls I could see Derek sitting at the mahogany table where I'd negotiated yesterday, his attention focused on his phone while other executives chatted around him. He looked relaxed, comfortable, completely unprepared for the revelation that was about to unfold. Marcus Chen entered the boardroom first, followed by Sarah Mitchell and the other executives who'd been part of yesterday's negotiations. I remained in the hallway, positioned where I could observe through the glass wall while staying out of Derek's line of sight. Good morning, everyone, Chen said, calling the meeting to order. Today's announcement represents a significant milestone for TechFlow Solutions. We've successfully negotiated a strategic partnership that will transform our analytics capabilities and market position. Derek looked up from his phone, his expression shifting to professional attention. This was exactly the kind of high-level business development he enjoyed hearing about, the type of strategic thinking that reinforced his sense of being part of an important organization. Over the past year, our analytics division has faced increasing competitive pressure, Chen continued, his presentation appearing on the wall-mounted display. Companies like Streamline Analytics have been consistently outperforming established firms through superior technology and innovative approaches. I watched Eric's reaction carefully. His expression suggested recognition of the challenges Chen was describing, confirmation that he'd been part of internal discussions about these competitive pressures. After extensive evaluation, we've determined that partnership rather than competition represents the best path forward, Chen announced. TechFlow Solutions has entered into a strategic alliance with Streamline Analytics. Effective immediately, the room buzzed with interested murmurs. This was clearly significant news, the kind of major partnership that would affect everyone's work and the company's future trajectory. Sarah Mitchell advanced to the next slide, showing Streamline's client roster and performance metrics. Derek leaned forward, studying the information with obvious interest. These weren't just impressive numbers. They represented solutions to problems his department had been struggling with for months. Streamline's proprietary AI technology addresses virtually every challenge we've identified in our analytics operations, Mitchell explained. Their client retention rates exceed industry standards, their predictive accuracy surpasses anything currently available in the market, and their scalability potential is remarkable. Derek was nodding approvingly, his expression reflecting both professional appreciation for Streamline's capabilities and personal satisfaction that his company had secured such a valuable partnership. He had no idea he was admiring his sister's work. The partnership structure maintains Streamline's operational independence, while providing access to our resources and client relational. Chen continued, this isn't a traditional acquisition where we absorb a smaller company. This is a collaboration between equals that benefits both organizations. More approving murmurs around the table. TechFlow's leadership team understood they were hearing about something significant, a strategic move that could define the company's competitive position for years to come. I'd like to introduce Streamline's founder and CEO, who will be joining our executive team as part of this partnership, Chen said, gesturing toward the door where I stood waiting. This was the moment. 3 years of careful planning, months of strategic positioning, and Derek's lifetime of assumptions about his little sister's capabilities were about to collide in the most dramatic way possible. I walked into the boardroom with the confident stride I'd practiced, my head held high and my expression reflecting the professional competence that had built Streamline into the success it had become. The executives around the table turned to see who Marcus Chen was introducing, their expressions reflecting polite interest in meeting their new partner. Derek's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally a kind of shocked understanding that left him staring at me with his mouth slightly open. "I'd like everyone to meet Zoe Parker, founder and CEO of Streamline Analytics," Marcus Chen announced with obvious satisfaction. "Zoe has built one of the most innovative analytics companies in the Pacific Northwest, and we're thrilled to welcome her expertise to our leadership team." The silence in the room was profound.
Every executive around the table was processing the introduction of their new partner. But Derek's reaction was so visible that several colleagues were glancing between us with growing curiosity. Parker has agreed to maintain her role as Streamline's CEO while also contributing to TechFlow's strategic planning, Sarah Mitchell added. Her insights into market trends and technological innovation will benefit every department in our organization. I took my seat at the conference table, directly across from Derek, whose expression had shifted from shock to something approaching panic. He was clearly trying to process how the sister he'd mocked just days ago had suddenly become his professional colleague, and at a level that exceeded his own position within the company. "Zoe, would you like to share some perspective on how this partnership will benefit both organizations?" Chen asked, providing me with the platform to address the room as Streamline's leader. "Absolutely," I said, my voice carrying the authority that came from 3 years of building something significant. Streamline Analytics has always focused on developing solutions that address real business challenges rather than pursuing recognition or publicity. This partnership with TechFlow allows us to scale those solutions while maintaining the innovation focus that has driven our success. Derek was still staring at me, his usual confident demeanor replaced by visible confusion. Around the table, other executives were nodding approvingly at my comments, clearly impressed by the composure and business acumen I was demonstrating. "Our integration planning will begin immediately," I continued. "Streamline's AI algorithms can be implemented across TechFlow's existing client projects within the next quarter, and our predictive analytics capabilities will enhance virtually every service offering in your portfolio." Sarah Mitchell leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm. "Zoe, could you elaborate on the scalability potential? Your technology seems to address challenges that have been limiting our growth in the analytics sector." The question provided an opportunity to demonstrate the depth of knowledge that had built Streamline's reputation, while also highlighting the sophistication Derek had been dismissing when he mocked my business at family gatherings. "Traditional analytics approaches are reactive," I explained, advancing to a slide showing Streamline's technological architecture. "They analyze what has happened and extrapolate trends based on historical patterns. Our AI system identifies emerging patterns in real time, allowing businesses to adapt to market changes before their competitors even recognize those changes are occurring." The room was completely focused on my presentation now, including Derek, whose professional interest was clearly overriding his personal shock. Despite his surprise at discovering his sister's identity, he couldn't ignore the business value of what I was describing. "This predictive capability is exactly what our clients have been requesting," said Tom Rodriguez, TechFlow's head of business development. "We've been losing contracts because our competitors can provide faster insights and more accurate forecasting." "Streamline's system has been operational for 18 months, I replied. "Our client retention rate is 97%, and our predictive accuracy consistently exceeds industry standards by significant margins." Derek finally found his voice. "Zoe, I don't understand. When did you develop all of this? Your LinkedIn post suggested Streamline was just getting started." The question provided the perfect opportunity to address the assumptions that had shaped his dismissive attitude while educating the entire room about the dangers of judging success based on visibility. "Streamline has been operational for 3 years, I said, meeting his gaze direct. "We made a strategic decision to prioritize substance over publicity, results over recognition.
While other companies were focused on building their profiles, we were focused on building better solutions. Marcus Chen nodded approvingly. That philosophy is evident in Streamline's performance metrics. They've achieved remarkable success while maintaining complete discretion about their operations. But why keep it secret? Derek asked, his voice reflecting genuine confusion rather than his usual condescension. If you had this kind of success, why not share it? The question went to the heart of everything I'd been trying to teach him about making assumptions based on appearances. Because success doesn't require an audience, I replied. The clients who matter know about our capability. The results speak for themselves. And frankly, operating below the radar has provided competitive advantages that publicity would have compromised. Sarah Mitchell was taking notes throughout our exchange, clearly recognizing the strategic wisdom of Streamline's approach. That discretion also allowed you to develop innovations without competitors copying your methods. Exactly. While others were announcing their plans, we were implementing solutions. While they were seeking recognition, we were serving clients. The market rewarded results, not publicity. Derek was quiet for several minutes, processing implications that clearly extended beyond just business consideration. His colleagues around the table were continuing to ask questions about integration timelines and technical specifications, but I could see him struggling with personal realizations about assumptions he'd made and comments he'd voiced. The meeting continued for another hour, covering operational details and strategic planning consideration. Throughout the discussion, I maintained the professional demeanor that had earned respect from TechFlow's leadership team, while observing Derek's gradual shift from shock to something approaching understanding. As executives began filing out of the conference room, Derek remained seated, clearly wanting to speak with me privately. Marcus Chen paused at the door, sensing the family dynamics that needed to be addressed. Zoe, congratulations again on this partnership. I think it's going to benefit everyone involved, he said diplomatically. Derek, I'm sure you'll be excited to work with Streamline's technology in your analytics project. The door closed, leaving Derek and me alone in the conference room, where yesterday I'd negotiated terms that had just transformed both our professional relationship and his understanding of his sister's capability. Zoe, I owe you an apology, Derek said quietly, his usual confidence replaced by genuine humility. I had no idea what you'd accomplished with Streamline. I've been completely wrong about your business. It's not just about Streamline, I replied. It's about the assumptions you made without taking time to understand what was actually happening. He nodded slowly, recognition dawning about the broader implications of his attitude. The barbecue last Sunday, when I laughed at your LinkedIn post about reaching 100 clients. Those 100 clients represent some of the most sophisticated analytics challenges in the industry, I said, but you assumed that because the number seemed small, the achievement was insignificant. Derek was quiet for a long moment, processing not just the business revelation, but the personal lesson it represented about judging people and situations based on incomplete information. The conversation that followed would determine whether this dramatic revelation could transform our relationship or whether the shock of discovering his assumptions were wrong would create lasting resentment. Either way, Derek's education about success, respect, and family was just beginning. The silence stretched between us for several minutes after the conference room door closed. Derek sat slumped in his chair, staring at the presentation materials scattered across the mahogany table, while I remained standing near the windows overlooking the Willamette River. The Portland skyline seemed different now, viewed from this executive conference room, where my brother was grappling with the complete collapse of his assumptions about success, business, and his own sister. I keep thinking about Sunday night, Derek finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I held up your LinkedIn post and made everyone laugh. God, Zoe, I was so cruel. The memory of that moment was still fresh, the sound of his dismissive laughter still sharp in my mind. But watching him now, seeing genuine remorse replace his usual arrogance, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction at his discomfort, but sadness at how long it had taken for this conversation to happen. It wasn't just Sunday night, I said, settling into the chair beside him rather than across the table. It's been 3 years of comments about my little hobby business and suggestions that I should get a real job. Every family gathering, every phone call with mom and dad, every opportunity you had to either support me or diminish what I was trying to build. Derek winced at each example, and I could see him mentally cataloging all the moments when he'd chosen mockery over encouragement. His face had lost the confident expression I'd grown accustomed to, replaced by something vulnerable and unfamiliar. I thought I was being realistic, he said weakly. The startup failure rate is so high, and you seemed so, I don't know, naive about the challenges involved in building a real business. Naive, the word hung in the air between us. Derek, while you were attending networking events and posting about your quarterly reviews, I was building relationships with Fortune 500 companies. While you were complaining about TechFlow's outdated analytics capabilities, I was developing the exact solutions your department needed. How is that naive? He had no answer, because there wasn't one. The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. While Derek had been measuring success by office size and job titles, I'd been creating actual value in the marketplace. Can you help me understand some? Derek asked, leaning forward with genuine curiosity, replacing his earlier shock. If Streamline was this successful, if you were making this kind of money and working with these kinds of clients, why live in that apartment in Hawthorne? Why drive that old Honda? Why let everyone think you were struggling? The question went to the heart of the strategy that had enabled Streamline's success while protecting me from exactly the kind of assumptions Derek had been making. Because the moment I started living like I was successful by other people's standards, everyone's perception of me would change, I explained. Clients would assume I was expensive. Competitors would start paying attention. Family members would treat me differently. And I'd never know if their support was genuine or just because I'd proven I could make money. Derek absorbed this, his expression showing recognition of the wisdom behind choices he'd previously interpreted as evidence of failure. Plus, I continued, there's real freedom in being underestimated. While competitors were fighting for attention and trying to prove themselves through expensive offices and flashy marketing, Streamline was quietly solving problems and building lasting relationships. Our overhead stayed low, our focus remained clear, and our results spoke for themselves to the people who mattered. The people who mattered, Derek repeated thoughtfully. You mean your clients didn't care about your car or your apartment? They cared about whether I could deliver solutions that saved them money and helped them make better decisions. Everything else was just noise. Derek was quiet again, processing implications that extended far beyond just our sibling relationship. As TechFlow's senior analytics director, he'd been part of countless discussions about competitive pressures and client retention challenges. Now he was learning that the sister he'd been dismissing had not only identified those same challenges, but had developed solutions that were superior to anything his department had been able to create. Marcus mentioned that Streamline has a 97% client retention rate, he said, eventually. That's remarkable in this industry. How did you achieve that? The shift in his tone was significant. Instead of the condescending curiosity he'd shown at family gatherings, Derek was asking genuine professional questions, seeking to understand rather than find flaws. By listening more than we talked, most analytics firms start with their capabilities and try to convince clients why those capabilities are valuable. We started by understanding what problems clients actually needed solved, then built solutions specifically for those problems. That's basic consulting methodology, Derek said, but without his usual dismissiveness. He seemed to be processing how something so fundamental could produce such extraordinary results. Basic, but not common. Too many companies, including TechFlow, get caught up in showcasing their technical sophistication rather than focusing on client outcomes. Streamline's AI algorithms are sophisticated, but clients don't care about the technology. They care about getting insights that help them make better decisions. Derek nodded slowly, recognition dawning about his own department's approach to client relationships. We do spend a lot of time explaining our methodologies instead of focusing on results. And that's not necessarily wrong, I said, surprised to find myself offering constructive perspective rather than just highlighting his mistakes. TechFlow has built strong relationships through transparency and educational approach. But there's a difference between educating clients and impressing them with complexity. The conversation was evolving beyond personal recriminations toward genuine professional dialogue. Derek was beginning to see me not just as his sister, who'd surprised him with hidden success, but as a colleague whose insights could benefit his own work. Zoe, I need to ask you something and I want you to be completely honest, Derek said, his voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard from him in years. Have I damaged our relationship permanently? I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough to undo 3 years of dismissing your work, but is there a way forward from here? The question revealed vulnerability that was completely at odds with the confident executive persona Derek typically projected. This wasn't just about admitting professional misjudgment. He was acknowledging that his behavior had hurt someone he supposedly cared about. Derek, the fact that you're asking that question suggests you understand something fundamental has to change, I said carefully. This isn't just about apologizing for past comments. It's about recognizing that your entire approach to evaluating other people's work and worth needs examination. What do you mean? I mean that I'm not the only person whose capabilities you've probably underestimated based on superficial factors. How do you treat junior employees at TechFlow? How do you respond to ideas from people who don't have impressive titles or advanced degrees? How do you evaluate proposals from companies that don't have flashy offices or venture capital backing? Derek's expression showed uncomfortable recognition. You're saying my attitude toward your business reflects broader biases in how I approach professional relationships. I'm saying that dismissing people based on appearances or conventional markers of success is a pattern that limits not just their opportunities but your own ability to recognize valuable ideas and partnerships. The observation clearly struck home. Derek spent several minutes in contemplative silence, probably reviewing interactions with colleagues, vendors, and potential partners through this new lens. God, Zoe, you're right, he said finally. There's a junior analyst in my department, Maria Santos, who keeps proposing process improvements that I've been brushing off because she's fresh out of college. And last month Marcus asked me to evaluate a potential vendor, but I recommended against them because their presentation wasn't polished enough, even though their technical approach was solid. What are you going to do differently? I asked, genuinely curious whether this moment of recognition would translate into lasting behavioral change. I don't know yet, but I need to figure it out. Starting with Maria's proposals and that vendor evaluation. Derek paused, then looked at me direct. And starting with how I talk about Streamline and your achievements to our family. What do you mean? Mom called this morning asking about the board meeting, because I'd mentioned TechFlow was announcing a major partnership. When I explain what actually happened, that my little sister is now my executive colleague, and her company is solving problems my department couldn't handle, I want to make sure I do it in a way that gives you the credit and respect you deserve. The offer was significant because it addressed one of the most painful aspects of Derek's previous behavior. His comments at family gatherings hadn't just been dismissive, they'd actively shaped how other relatives viewed my business effort. Parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins had all absorbed his narrative that Streamline was a struggling startup worthy more of sympathy than support. I appreciate that, I said, but Derek, this can't just be about changing how you talk about Streamline now that you know it's successful. The lesson here is about giving people credit and respect before you know how their stories end. You mean treating people well regardless of whether their ventures succeed or fail. Exactly. Success isn't always visible, and failure isn't always permanent. The way you treat someone when they're struggling or trying something new reveals more about your character than how you act when they've already proven themselves. Derek was taking notes on his phone, a habit I recognized from his business meeting. The gesture suggested he was treating this conversation as seriously as any professional development discussion. Zoe, can I ask about the timeline for Streamline's growth? I'm trying to understand when you transitioned from actually struggling to being successful but maintaining the appearance of struggle. The question showed he was beginning to grasp the complexity of the strategy I'd been implementing, but it also revealed assumptions that still needed correction. That's the wrong way to think about it, I said. Streamline was never struggling in the sense of being unsuccessful or unprofitable. We were deliberately operating below the radar, which is completely different from struggling to survive. But in the early days when you were working out of that co-working space and driving the Honda, surely you were facing real challenges. Of course, but they were growth challenges, not survival challenges. The difference is crucial. We had more client inquiries than we could handle, more opportunities than we could pursue, more revenue than we could efficiently invest. Those are good problems to have. Derek shook his head in amazement. So while I was worried about your financial stability and career prospects, you were actually turning away business because you had too much demand. Sometimes, but more often we were being selective about which opportunities aligned with our long-term vision. Growth for its own sake can destroy a company's culture and competitive advantage. That's sophisticated strategic thinking, Derek said, and for the first time in our conversation, his tone carried genuine admiration rather than surprise or remorse. Most entrepreneurs would grab every opportunity, especially in the early stage. Most entrepreneurs also fail because they lose focus or compromise their core competencies trying to be everything to everyone, I replied. Streamline succeeded because we stayed disciplined about what we did well and who we served best. The shift in Derek's perspective was becoming more apparent with each exchange. He was no longer processing our conversation as a revelation about his sister's hidden capabilities, but as a masterclass in business strategy from a colleague he respected. I have to admit something, Derek said, his voice carrying a mixture of professional interest and personal embarrassment. The analytics challenges Marcus mentioned in the meeting, the competitive pressures our department has been facing, the the client retention issues we've been trying to solve. I've been complaining about all of those problems at family dinners for months. I know, I heard every complaint, and you never suggested that Streamline might have solutions. Would you have listened? More importantly, would you have taken the suggestions seriously if they came from your sister who you believed was running a failing startup? Derek's silence was answer enough. We both knew that any advice I'd offered would have been dismissed as naive enthusiasm from someone who didn't understand real business challenges. Plus, I continued, there's a difference between having solutions and having the relationship foundation necessary to implement them. TechFlow needed to discover Streamline's capabilities through their own evaluation process. If I'd simply told you about our technology, it would have seemed like family favoritism rather than legitimate business opportunity. So yesterday's meeting with Marcus wasn't just about negotiating partnership terms. It was about establishing credibility independent of our family relationship. Exactly. Marcus Chen and Sarah Mitchell evaluated Streamline based purely on business merit. Their enthusiasm for the partnership validates our capabilities in a way that family recommendations never could. Derek was nodding thoughtfully, clearly processing the strategic sophistication behind decisions he'd previously interpreted as missed opportunities or poor judgment. This is going to sound strange, he said after a moment, but I'm starting to feel proud of what you've accomplished, and also grateful that you're willing to share your expertise with TechFlow despite how I've treated your business. The admission represented genuine growth, but it also highlighted the complexity of our evolving relationship. Derek was recognizing my professional competence, while simultaneously grappling with guilt about his previous dismissiveness. Derek, I didn't orchestrate this partnership to teach you a lesson or prove a point, I said. Streamline and TechFlow have complementary strengths that can benefit both companies. The personal dimensions are secondary to the business opportunity, but the personal dimensions matter too. I've been a terrible brother in terms of supporting your entrepreneurial efforts. You've been a brother who made assumptions based on incomplete information. Now you have more complete information, and you can choose to respond differently going forward. What does responding differently look like? The question provided an opportunity to move beyond apologies and recriminations toward constructive future planning. It looks like treating Maria Santos' process improvement proposals with the serious consideration they deserve. It looks like reevaluating that vendor you dismissed based on presentation style. It looks like questioning your assumptions about success, competence, and who deserves respect in professional setting. Derek was taking more notes, treating our conversation as actionable professional development rather than just personal reconciliation. And it looks like supporting other family members when they take risks or try new things, regardless of whether their efforts fit conventional definitions of success, I added. Our cousin Bradley's photography business, Derek said immediately. I've been pretty dismissive about his chances of making it commercially viable. Photography is a challenging industry, but that doesn't mean Bradley's efforts aren't worthy of support. Even if his venture doesn't succeed financially, he's developing skills, building relationships, and learning about business operations.
Those experiences have value regardless of the final outcome. I never thought about it that way, Derek admitted. I've been measuring everyone's efforts against traditional career success metrics, which is natural given your background and professional environment. But there are many ways to create value and achieve fulfillment, and most of them don't involve corner offices or quarterly performance reviews. Our conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the conference room door. Sarah Mitchell appeared, her expression mixing professional courtesy with personal curiosity about the family dynamics she'd witnessed during the morning's announcement. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but we have several integration planning meetings scheduled this afternoon. Zoe, your insights on client transition strategies would be valuable for those discussions. The reminder brought us back to the immediate business reality underlying this personal revelation. Streamline's partnership with TechFlow required actual work beyond just dramatic announcements and family reconciliation. Of course, I said, gathering my materials. Derek, we should continue this conversation soon, but the integration planning takes priority right now. Absolutely, Derek agreed, standing as well. And Zoe, I want you to know that I'm looking forward to working with you professionally. Not as your older brother who's been wrong about your capabilities, but as a colleague who respects what you've built and wants to learn from your experience. The statement represented more growth in 2 hours than our relationship had seen in 3 years. Whether that growth would translate into lasting change remained to be seen, but the foundation for a different kind of relationship had finally been established. As we left the conference room where Derek had learned that success doesn't always announce itself loudly,
I found myself cautiously optimistic about what this revelation might mean not just for our family dynamic, but for his entire approach to recognizing and respecting other people's contributions to the business world. 6 months later, I stood in the same TechFlow conference room, where Derek had first learned about Streamline's true success, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. The quarterly review meeting was wrapping up, and the numbers on the wall-mounted display told a story of transformation that exceeded everyone's most optimistic projection. Streamline's integration has generated a 43% increase in client satisfaction scores. Sarah Mitchell announced to the assembled executive team, "Our retention rate has improved to 95%, and we've successfully bid on 12 major contracts that would have been impossible before the partnership." Marcus Chen nodded approvingly from the head of the table. The revenue impact has been equally impressive. Our analytics division is now our fastest growing segment, and we've received inquiries from 3 Fortune 100 companies specifically requesting Streamline's predictive capability. Derek raised his hand from his seat near the middle of the table, and I noticed how different his demeanor had become during these meetings. The aggressive confidence that used to characterize his contributions had been replaced by thoughtful consideration and genuine collaboration. "I'd like to acknowledge Maria Santos's role in the client transition process," Derek said. "Her process improvement proposals, which I initially overlooked, have been instrumental in seamlessly integrating Streamline's technology with our existing client relations." Maria, who was presenting her first quarterly report to the executive team, beamed with pride and confidence. The young analyst Derek had dismissed 6 months ago was now leading one of TechFlow's most successful operational initiatives. Maria's insights identified integration challenges we hadn't anticipated, I added, making sure her contributions received proper recognition. Her recommendations prevented potential service disruptions that could have compromised client relationships during the transition. The meeting continued for another hour, covering expansion plans, technology developments, and strategic partnerships that had emerged from Streamline's success within TechFlow's broader ecosystem. Throughout the discussion, I observed Derek's interactions with colleagues, noting how fundamentally his approach to professional relationships had evolved. When Tom Rodriguez mentioned concerns about a potential vendor's unconventional presentation style, Derek immediately pushed back. "Their technical approach is solid, and their cost projections are realistic. We shouldn't dismiss them because their marketing materials don't match our aesthetic preferences." The comment would have been unremarkable for most executives, but coming from Derek, it represented a complete reversal of the mindset that had led him to mock my business just months earlier. He was actively fighting against the superficial judgments that had once defined his professional decision-making. After the meeting, Derek and I walked together toward the elevator, our conversation flowing with the easy collaboration that had developed as we'd worked on various integration projects. The sibling rivalry that had dominated our relationship for years had been replaced by mutual respect and genuine professional partnership. "Zoe, I wanted to update you on something," Derek said as we waited for the elevator. "Remember that vendor I mentioned, dismissing because their presentation wasn't polished enough? I reached out to them last week, and we're moving forward with a pilot project. How's it going? Better than expected. Their technical solutions are innovative, and their project management approach is more efficient than our current vendors. If I'd stuck with my initial assessment, we would have missed a valuable partnership opportunity." The elevator arrived, and we rode down to the parking garage in comfortable silence. Derek's BMW was parked next to my Honda, which I'd kept despite Streamline's success. The visual contrast still amused me, representing different philosophies about how success should be displayed. "Are you still planning to drive that car until it completely falls apart?" Derek asked with genuine curiosity rather than his former condescension. "Actually, I've been thinking about upgrading. Not because I need to prove anything, but because the Honda is starting to require more maintenance than it's worth." "What are you considering?" "Something practical and reliable. Maybe a newer Honda or a Toyota. I don't need luxury. I need functionality." Derek laughed, but it was warm and affectionate rather than mocking. "Of course you do. That's exactly the kind of practical thinking that made Streamline successful while other companies were spending money on image instead of substance." We'd reached our cars, but Derek seemed reluctant to end the conversation. "Zoe,
I've been meaning to ask you something. Mom mentioned that you're thinking about expanding Streamline's operation. Are you considering opening additional offices? The question touched on strategic decisions I'd been wrestling with as Streamline's success within TechFlow had generated new opportunities and challenges. Growth for its own sake had never been my objective, but the partnership had created possibilities that warranted serious consideration. I'm exploring options, I said carefully. There's demand for Streamline's services in Seattle, San Francisco, and even some East Coast markets. The question is whether expansion aligns with our core mission, or just represents ego-driven growth. What does Dr. Valdez think? Derek's question surprised me. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have known who Dr. Valdez was, much less considered her opinion relevant to business decisions. His awareness of my mentorship relationships reflected the deeper interest he'd developed in understanding how I actually built Streamline's success. She thinks expansion could be valuable if it's driven by client needs rather than competitive positioning, I replied. Her advice is to let demand pull us into new markets rather than pushing into markets because they seem attractive. That sounds consistent with your original approach. Streamline grew because clients needed your services, not because you were chasing market share. An expansion done right could create opportunities for other talented people who might not fit traditional corporate structures. Dr. Valdez has identified several graduate students with innovative ideas who could thrive in Streamline's culture. Derek was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. You're thinking about creating opportunities for people like you were 3 years ago, talented individuals who might be underestimated by established firms, but also recognizing that innovation often comes from unexpected places. The tech industry has a tendency to look for talent in predictable locations, and overlook capable people who don't fit standard profiles. Like you didn't fit the standard profile of a successful tech entrepreneur. Like Maria didn't fit your standard profile of someone whose ideas deserved serious consideration. The parallel was clear, and Derek's expression showed appreciation for how his personal growth connected to broader industry dynamics. Speaking of Maria, she asked me something interesting yesterday, Derek said. She wanted to know if TechFlow would support her pursuing an MBA while continuing to work here part-time. Apparently she's been accepted to Portland State's evening program. What did you tell her? I told her absolutely, and that I'd personally recommend her for TechFlow's educational assistance program. A year ago, I probably would have seen her academic pursuits as distraction from her current responsibility. The admission reflected how completely Derek's perspective on professional development and employee potential had evolved. Instead of viewing education as competition for workplace focus, he now recognized it as investment in long-term capability. Maria mentioned that you offered to connect her with Dr. Valdez for mentorship advice, I said. I figured if Dr. Valdez helped guide your development, she might have insights that could benefit Maria's career planning. Plus, I'm learning that successful people often succeed because they had good mentors, not just natural talent. Derek's recognition of mentorship's importance represented another fundamental shift in his thinking. The executive who used to attribute success primarily to individual achievement now understood the collaborative nature of most professional growth. Derek, I want you to know how much I appreciate the changes you've made, I said as we prepared to get into our respective cars. Not just in how you treat me, but in your entire approach to working with people. I had a good teacher, he replied with a smile that mixed gratitude with residual embarrassment about his previous behavior. Though I wish I'd learned these lessons without putting you through 3 years of dismissiveness first. The important thing is that you learned them, and that you're applying them broadly, not just in our relationship. Actually, there's something else I want to tell you, Derek said, his tone shifting to something more serious. I've been working with HR to revise our hiring and promotion criteria. Too many of our evaluation processes favor traditional credentials over actual capability. The initiative represented Derek taking ownership of systemic changes rather than just personal behavior modification. He was working to ensure that other talented individuals wouldn't face the same dismissive treatment he'd shown me. What kind of changes are you implementing? Skills-based assessments that focus on problem-solving abilities rather than just resume credentials. Interview processes that evaluate creative thinking alongside technical knowledge. And promotion criteria that consider innovative contributions even when they come from unexpected sources. That sounds like it could benefit a lot of people who might otherwise be overlooked. That's the goal. I keep thinking about how many Maria Santos types we've probably passed over because they didn't fit our standard expectations. Derek's phone buzzed with a text message, and he glanced at the screen before smiling broadly. Speaking of Maria,
She just sent me the preliminary results from that vendor pilot project. Their efficiency metrics are exceeding our projected improvements by 30%. The vendor you almost dismissed because of presentation style, the same one, which proves your point about judging substance over style, and also proves that good ideas can come from anywhere if you're willing to listen. We finally got into our cars, but Derek rolled down his window before starting his engine. Zoe, one more thing. Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's this week. I'm planning to share some updates about TechFlow's success and Streamline's contribution. I want to make sure the whole family understands what you've actually accomplished. The gesture was significant because it addressed the narrative Derek had helped create through years of dismissive comments at family gatherings. Our relatives still operated under assumptions about Streamline being a struggling startup rather than the successful company that had transformed TechFlow's competitive position. I appreciate that, but don't oversell it. Streamline's success speaks for itself through results, not through publicity. I understand, but our family should know that when they ask about your business, they're asking about one of the most innovative companies in the Pacific Northwest analytics sector. Derek started his car and pulled out of the parking space, leaving me sitting in my Honda reflecting on how dramatically our relationship had evolved. The brother who had mocked my startup just 6 months ago was now actively promoting my achievements in implementing organizational changes inspired by lessons he'd learned from dismissing my capabilities. That evening, I sat in my Hawthorne apartment preparing for a video call with Dr. Valdez, our monthly mentorship session that had become even more valuable as Streamline navigated the complexities of rapid growth within TechFlow's structure. Zoe, you sound different, Dr. Valdez said after we'd discussed business metrics and expansion planning. More settled, less defensive about Streamline's position in the market. Her observation was perceptive, as always. The psychological burden of operating under deliberate misconceptions had been more exhausting than I'd realized until it was removed. I think it's relief. For 3 years, I maintained this facade of struggling startup founder while actually running a successful company. The mental energy required to manage those contradictory realities was significant. And now that Derek and your family know the truth, there's freedom in authenticity, even when authenticity comes with its own complications. Derek's transformation has been remarkable, but it's also created new expectations and responsibilities. Dr. Valdez nodded thoughtfully. Success often creates different challenges than failure. When people underestimated you, the stakes were lower in some ways. Exactly. Now Derek sees me as a business mentor. Marcus Chen includes me in strategic planning decisions, and the Portland tech community has started recognizing Streamline as an industry leader. The visibility has benefits, but it also means every decision gets more scrutiny. How are you handling that increased visibility? By staying focused on the same principles that built Streamline's success, client results matter more than industry recognition, innovation matters more than publicity, and treating people with respect matters more than maintaining hierarchical boundaries. Those principles served you well when you were operating below the radar. They'll serve you equally well now that Streamline has a higher profile. Our conversation continued for another hour, covering strategic planning considerations and personal growth reflections. Valdez's guidance had been instrumental in Streamline's development, and her perspective remained valuable as I navigated new challenges that came with success and recognition. As we wrapped up our call, Valdez offered one final observation that crystallized the broader significance of the past 6 months. Zoe, what you accomplished with Derek goes beyond just changing his opinion about your business. You demonstrated that people can evolve beyond their biases when presented with evidence that contradicts their assumptions. That's a powerful lesson with implications that extend far beyond family relationships. She was right. Derek's transformation from dismissive skeptic to supportive colleague represented proof that even deeply held prejudices could be overcome through patient education and consistent demonstration of competence. The following Sunday, I arrived at my parents' house in Beaverton for our weekly family dinner. The familiar sounds and smells of childhood surrounded me, but the dynamic felt completely different from that painful barbecue 6 months earlier when Derek had mocked my LinkedIn post in front of our extended family. Derek was already there, chatting with our cousin Bradley about photography techniques and marketing strategies for creative business. The conversation was respectful and encouraging, completely at odds with the dismissive attitude Derek had previously shown toward Bradley's entrepreneurial efforts. Zoe, Mom called from the kitchen. Derek was just telling us about Streamline's latest client contract. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. The pride in her voice was genuine, but it was also tinged with bemusement about how dramatically the family narrative had shifted. 6 months ago, She'd been gently encouraging me to consider more stable career options. Now she was bragging to neighbors about her daughter's successful tech company. During dinner, Derek shared updates about TechFlow's growth and Streamline's contributions without any of the competitive edge that had previously characterized his family business discussion. He spoke about our collaboration with genuine enthusiasm and made sure to credit my innovations for improvements in his department's performance. The integration has been seamless, he told our gathered relatives. Zoe's approach to client relationships and technology development has elevated everyone's capabilities. We're not just working together, we're learning from each other. The conversation that followed was everything Derek's previous dismissiveness had prevented. Family members asked thoughtful questions about streamlined services, offered congratulations on our partnership success, and expressed genuine interest in the innovative work we were doing. Uncle Luis, who owned a small manufacturing business, even inquired about potential consulting services for his supply chain optimization challenges. The conversation was professional and respectful, treating me as a knowledgeable business owner rather than someone whose efforts deserved sympathy. As the evening wound down, Derek and I found ourselves on the back patio where he'd mocked my business just months earlier. The same string lights cast warm illumination over the space, but everything felt different now. You know what's funny? Derek said, looking out at the Mount Hood silhouette visible in the distance. 6 months ago, I thought I understood success, corner offices, expense accounts, recognition from industry publications. Now I realize those were just symbols, not substance. Success looks different from the inside than it does from the outside, I agreed. Streamline taught me that sustainable achievement comes from solving real problems for people who value solutions over status symbols. And you taught me that assumptions based on appearances are not just wrong, they're expensive. If TechFlow had dismissed Streamline the way I initially dismissed your business, we would have missed the most valuable partnership opportunity in our company's history. Derek's recognition of the broader implications was gratifying, because it suggested lasting change rather than temporary adjustment to new information. Derek, I'm curious about something. When you think about the future, what do you want to accomplish professionally? The question seemed to catch him off guard, as if he hadn't considered long-term goals beyond traditional career advancement metrics. I want to be known for recognizing and developing talent, especially talent that might be overlooked by conventional assessment methods, he said after thinking for a moment. Maria Santos is just the beginning. There are probably dozens of innovative thinkers in our organization whose ideas haven't received proper consideration. That sounds like a meaningful objective. It is, and it's inspired by watching what you accomplished by focusing on substance over recognition. I want to help other people achieve their potential without having to prove themselves dramatically the way you had to with me. The conversation was interrupted by Mom calling us back inside for dessert, but Derek's words stayed with me as we rejoined the family gathering. His commitment to recognizing others' potential represented the best possible outcome from our difficult journey toward mutual understanding. Later that evening, as I drove my Honda back to Hawthorne through Portland's quiet Sunday night streets, I reflected on the complete transformation of my relationship with Derek and the broader lessons our experience illustrated. Success hadn't required dramatic gestures or public vindication. It had required patience, consistency, and willingness to let results speak for themselves. Derek's education about assumptions and respect had unfolded gradually through sustained demonstration of competence, rather than confrontational correction of his biases. Most importantly, the changes in Derek's behavior extended far beyond our sibling relationship. His newfound commitment to recognizing overlooked talent and questioning superficial assessments would benefit countless colleagues and potential partners throughout his career. The Parker family barbecue, where Derek had laughed at my startup, now seemed like the opening chapter of a much larger story about growth, understanding, and the power of quiet persistence over loud proclamation. Streamline Analytics had not only succeeded as a business venture, it had become a catalyst for personal transformation that rippled through family relationships, professional dynamics, and industry perspectives on what success actually meant. As I pulled into my apartment parking space, I felt gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. The challenges had been significant, the patience required had been substantial, and the risks had been real. But the outcome had exceeded my most optimistic expectations, creating positive change that extended far beyond business metrics or family harmony. Derek had learned that success doesn't always announce itself loudly,
and I had learned that the most meaningful victories often involve helping others recognize their own potential for growth and understanding. Streamline's greatest achievement wasn't the technology we'd developed or the clients we'd served, but the demonstration that patient persistence and consistent excellence could transform not just business relationships, but the fundamental way people approached evaluating and supporting each other's dreams. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.